thanks to everyone for being here with us today and joining this webinar with us. Today we're joined by someone really special. He's one of the biggest names in the Indian sports management industry, especially the football scene. He has over 10 years of experience in the sports industry, and he's particularly, his expertise particularly pertains to football, and he's also associated with the Indian Super League and I Leagues and state associations as well, amongst others. And also he is credited with the widespread development and promotion of football as a sport in the northeastern region of India, where most of football players hail. He's also the co-founder of 8 Goals, One Foundation, which is basically and which also basically started the Young Legends League for young children, and is recognized by the All India Football Federation. So there's truly to answer all your questions about the sports industry in India, and also to some level to give us like a global gist. There's nobody else better than Varun. So first of all, thank you so much, Varun, for joining us today and giving us your precious time. So for the talk today, we'll have Varun explore the sports industry and issues pertaining to sports, as well as sports people, and how it relates to mental health. And a little about the helpline. I'm sure, as everyone knows, we're all, so Krishna and I represent the Covid19 Helpline India, and we are basically a pro bono initiative which deals with issues of mental health which have stemmed from the fact that we are all in isolation because of the pandemic that the world finds itself in. So today we have Varun to touch upon the topics of sports and how it relates to mental health. And so I'm just gonna give it away to Krishna, who's going to jump into some questions and go ahead and ask some questions to Varun.
Okay, so we'll jump right into the questions, Varun. First thing is, see, obviously February this year, the governments of most countries started announcing the lockdown as a means to contain the spread of this COVID-19. And in India itself, we had the lockdown starting from the 25th of March, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to know, what is your initial reaction to this lockdown phase?
Well, I think it started a little bit earlier in China, and things were stopping like in different places. We could hear stories from Italy and other places. And then we being in football, at least from one perspective, from the Indian Super League perspective, the league actually finished, like only the final was remaining. So that was that. But obviously, in general, just the lockdown, just the thought of a lockdown, I think not just for sports people, but in general for the whole country was a little bit of a shocker. I don't think people were expecting to go into a lockdown. They didn't expect how serious this was going to be. And when that happened, sports, which is generally, something which is either you do it with your friends or do it with a family, or you do it competitively, or you consume it as a fan, all of it requires some kind of a social interaction, and you will be close to people. And with the dangers that this disease has really shown in the last 5-6 months, that sport would definitely have to take the back seat, and we could see that all sporting competitions were halted all across the world and in India as well. And I think till further notice, we'll be in that lockdown phase with the sport.
Okay.
So yeah, it was pretty challenging, and it is pretty challenging.
Okay, so on a lighter note, how did you manage to find a routine? Obviously, you are very busy with all the managing and stuff. So how did you manage to find a routine in the first month?
It's difficult. It was difficult in the beginning, but I think now with everything going very digital, it was not that big a problem. So you could always be in sync with everybody. You have the times, and everybody respects your time that way. And to be honest, being at home, you actually have more time in a way. You don't have to go to the office. You don't have to come back to the office. You save time on that. So that way, if your productivity levels are higher, and if you have that work, then you could probably have more time to yourself, and then that way you could probably include more things and have a better routine. So it wasn't that big a challenge, to be honest. And I don't think it is a challenge that way. You probably feel that, you're not doing something that you used to do on a daily basis, but like habits, like routines, they can all change. And I think over a period of time, everybody would have got used to it and made the most of it post the same.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yes, obviously. I mean, uh, we are in that digital area, and me being a student, we had to transition into online classes, and the hardest thing was obviously not meeting with my friends and things like that. But otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like I said, the void will be there because it's something suddenly taken away from you. It's never happened before. I don't think in our lifetimes we've ever been through something like this before. So obviously it was going to be a shock for everyone and how everybody took it. But as far as the routine is concerned, I think everybody would have, after maybe 15 days or 20 days, would have got back into the new,
Yeah.
as everybody's calling it. It
Yeah.
wasn't normal then, maybe after the 14 days, but at least you would know, okay, we don't know when this is going to end. So let's start adapting. Let's start doing that. And as long as, like I said, if it's not compromising what you're supposed to be doing, it could probably help you set more things in your routine, and you could do maybe more things in that time. So let's take the positive side of it from that.
Right. Okay. So the next one would be, obviously, sports is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the worldwide. And as you previously mentioned, although it is lower than other nations, India, it provides employment to nearly 500,000 people from the statistics that I came across. So what does the pandemic mean for the industry and the job security of the people?
It's a tough one. So now, if you look at Europe, sport generates enough money for the sport to survive and sustain itself. So the leagues, like the English Premier League, is back. As I mentioned, Liverpool just won the trophy last year. Digitally, everybody all over the world who are Liverpool fans are enjoying and celebrating. Uh, they had big sponsorship deals. They have a big audience globally that really consumes the sport. And if you would have noticed, like the biggest way of consuming sport is either through the television or digitally. So them coming back with all the precautions has actually at least got things back in order, because they have to complete the leagues that way. And as I mentioned, India, the league was finished, so it didn't impact it like that. But in India, uh, sport, apart from maybe cricket to an extent, is generally dependent on, and apart from a little bit of individual sports, because that's up to the individual's income levels or propensity to pay and so on and so forth. In India, other sports are dependent on other businesses making the money, because that's where the investment is coming from. So now, because all the other businesses have taken a back seat and taken a big hit, the impact of the same is coming, and we can see that on the sports side of things. And as I mentioned before, and we discussed, fans, engagement, recreation, all this, when it comes to security, becomes, you know, it's not a necessity thing. It's not a necessary thing. It's basically you have to take precautions first. So I think it's taken a big toll on the industry in that regard. But slowly, you can see how the steps are being taken to be more precautious and to put in the right systems for getting away from this. And I feel people are moving into the digital side of things more for the consumption of sport. So that way, India, where sport was not consumed digitally so much, is a very good avenue where we can play catch up. And when the sport actually returns to normal, we are in a much better position than we were digitally, where we can actually get to more people in a more cost-effective way. So I think, yeah, that's something that we can look forward to. But yes, definitely in this transition period of maybe 12 to 18 months, since sporting events are not happening, I think it is going to take a big toll on certain people who would be working in the industry in different capacities, depending upon different sports. Such as, if you want to take an example, people who work in, say, sporting operations. Now, if the events are not happening, what are they going to operate at? So that's going to leave a void for them in the long run. So yeah, I mean, definitely. But I think globally, like you can see the trend how it's coming back. Uh, People will still be affected, but not as much. For example, like the vendors at a stadium who used to
Right.
cater to, the food vendors at the stadium who used to cater to the fans. Now they don't need to be there.
Right.
The security companies that used to be there to manage the crowds or to see how things can get done in a seamless way, they're not going to be there. So for them, they were a part of the sports industry. They are also stakeholders in the industry. It would
Yeah.
really impact them negatively. But for the others, some of them are coming in, you know, like more precautions. So more medical side of things are coming in, which never used to be there before. So it's creating
Right.
another avenue for jobs that way. And also digital again, content creation. The way you create the content now is taking different ways and methodologies and trying to get to different kinds of people. Like, I mean, I think you guys will agree. The elderly in our families never used to use smartphones and so on and so forth like a while back. But now suddenly,
Yeah.
because everybody's got so much time and they can't meet people and do the normal things as before, they've all gone to those digital assets. And now an audience that sport could never reach before has automatically become available for it to explore. So I think that's also another positive that we can take from that, and build on from there when things do get back to normal.
Right. So, I mean, as you said, sports viewership is probably the biggest part of their revenue of the industry. And right now, there has been this increasing trend towards, streaming and like online services. So, obviously, those losses are contained
Yeah,
to a greater extent than what was anticipated initially.
yeah, and
Okay.
I
So
mean,
how did you? I mean, it must have obviously been a very huge change for you. So how did you personally cope with this change in
see,
terms?
like I said, the industry, like the league had actually finished. One league
Yeah,
got cancelled, and the winner was given. And this generally in football is the off season. So Indian football that way, in terms of where they were on the calendar phase, were a
right.
little bit lucky on that stage. But of course, it's a challenge coming back now because everything moves forward, and we don't know when things would get back to normal. Like the leagues that we do in the Northeast, where children come and play, like 360 children or 240 children in different places. Uh, I don't think like the parents would want the kids to come and be in contact with other kids, where it's very difficult in all areas to take as many precautions. Now, when you're doing a sport for the TV, when it's going to millions of people across the world, you know what's at stake. You will go down that, like, down the extra mile and try to take as many precautions as possible to make sure that you can deliver that product and it is for a larger audience. But when it comes to recreation, when it comes to grassroots, when it comes to all these kind of things like soccer schools where you go and play or you go and train, it'll be long before I think parents would be comfortable in sending their kids out for those. I think the first step where we could actually see a positive and take things from there would be when schools reopen and how schools tackle children going there. I think that can teach us a lot of things, and I think that's something that we can look into, and then see how it can be in sync with fans coming to the stadiums, or children going and playing um, together in the evenings, their soccer schools or their academies or other classes. Obviously, it will depend from sport to sport. Individual sports, maybe you can go and do earlier because it can
Yeah,
be an isolation, but team sports could be a little difficult. But cricket being a different kind of a team sport, there is not too much connect between people. So you could still do that. You could still be in the nets, and you could still have a cricket match without the audience. Of course, whatever money generation happens from the gate sales will not happen. But at the end of the day, you will still have a great product for the masses who are sitting in their comfort zones and sitting with their families where they consume sport. Be safe and you know uh, move out from that.
yeah.
So that's, I think, that it won't get impacted that much. But of course, for the fans, it's a big drawback. Yeah.
Right. And right, also as you mentioned, the leagues, they just, I mean, they were in a lucky period, and this is an off season for them. But all around the world, athletes all around the world have not trained
Yeah.
for at least a couple of months now. And what do you think will be the physiological and the mental impacts of not
Yeah.
training?
So as I said, India was lucky, but not the globe. Generally, leagues in Europe finish in May. So the season is now restarted, and they're going into a period where they never used to play before, which is June and July. This used to be like a holiday period. So uh, they're going to be starting their pre-seasons a little earlier this time. And as you said, people are not getting to train. They also, when they announced when the league was actually going to start, they try to take as many precautions as possible for their training regimes so that the risk of injury is minimized as much. But as you can see from the first game that actually took place, I think it was Man City versus Arsenal. There were two injuries in that game, and then Liverpool played, uh, I think it was Everton, and in that game there were two injuries again. So you can see the impact of not being in that zone, not being in that physical condition, having an impact on these things. But again, because the timelines are there and they have to conclude certain things in certain time frames, they try to get in faster. And this is the Premier League. So if you can see the impact of that in the Premier League, just imagine the impact of that in a little less organized and smaller setups. It will be a definite big challenge, sure. And it's taking a toll. You can see that. But as we discussed before as well, uh, every competition for any sport will be giving enough time for the athletes to train and be competitive,
Yeah. So
even if they
one more thing. I
yeah.
mean, a big part of team sports is, um, the your ability to talk and like interact with your team members and your coach, and a lot of people right now are sticking to home trainings and things like that. So, what would be the mental health consequences of that, of not being a part of a team, not being with your coach?
It is challenging, but again, I feel every sport has certain skills. You need a lot of skill sets for playing every sport. So I feel there are a lot of skills and a lot of attributes that can be worked on individually that will actually improve your game when you actually get back into playing when you're with your team.
Yeah,
So they should take that as a positive and try to work on those things. So I think a lot of academies have started doing online classes. And
yeah,
if you see, I think um, the fitness side of things, I think there are so many people who've gone to exercising because earlier they used to think that, in their normal routines, they were doing enough activity where they were a little active. But now suddenly, because they're sitting at home, they might actually be doing much more activity than what they would be doing, when they used to go to the office and sit on a chair and come back. But now they
yeah,
probably have, as you mentioned before, as a part of the routine. I think people have exercises as a part of their routine that they look forward to in a day because, sitting in one place or sitting in isolation gives them that boredom. So that's something that they look forward to, or go to the park and have a run and come back. Some things like that I think are things that can be taken positive from this.
I mean, what they predict is you either like come out extremely fit or very unhealthy after this lockdown period.
I completely agree, and I hope I can be a little bit in the middle. But I think I'm going to the other side that you said, and I'm scared of that. But anyway, that's that.
You said you have been actively involved in the Indian football industry, the Indian football area. And are you doing anything to cope with, as you said, there are online trainings and things like that to help the athletes stay at home and be better prepared. So are you doing personally, are you doing anything or?
Yes, so our team in the south, they prepare online classes. They record videos of some certain exercises that stress on certain attributes that you can really improve. That when you come into a team scenario, they will help. Individual ball drills, individual exercises, and also we are supplementing that with some kind of printouts for the parents to give them as like how should I say, like to make a scrapbook by the end of it. so that they can just put those in. So it's like questions on Indian football, questions like jumbled words, something to keep them active. It's like an activity where you're not just learning about the sport, but you're also learning things that you would do in general at school. So it's putting those in practice here, and a mix of both. So both stay, together. And
as a person.
Yeah. And that way, the coaches interact with the kids more often. The parents are also keeping the kids engaged with that, because after a point, I think the kids also become really good, and they don't understand this. I think some of people who are older than us also don't understand this. So how do you expect kids to understand a situation like this? They don't know, like, why can't I meet my friend? Why can't I go out and play? What is the possibility? They can't see the virus. They don't know what it is. So this way, at least it's a part. And as you know, like India also, exams got postponed, but this generally in India is a holiday period, summer vacations.
Yeah.
So okay, fine. Some of it can be absorbed in that way. But yeah, and I have seen other academies and clubs also taking up to these where they are involving their players who have a certain recall value, who have a certain fan following, doing these drills, which the kids can then take up, and then they do it at home. That improves their individual skills, so that when they come back onto the pitch, at least they've improved on certain areas of their game.
Right.
And I think that goes not just with football, that goes with quite a few sports. I think you can do that almost a lot of sports, except for maybe swimming. I don't know, maybe you can do a lot of weight training, or you can do a little bit of agility exercises or something on those lines that could at least keep you fitter, so that you don't have to work that hard when you get back.
We have a lot of applications and other websites which cater to keeping physical fitness at home. So do you recommend anything from your experience? Or
from my experience, yeah, I'm not following any of these. I think there are enough out there. You can, you just need to do something. It doesn't have to be a website. It doesn't have to be an app. It can just be the basics. If you are a part of any program, I think the best person to tell you at the time would be the coach or the academy that you were training with, because then they're looking into it and they'll take it forward. If you do too many things from too many places, then it's not in sync. So what happens is, maybe a particular plan is for a particular way of you coming back into the sport, and somebody is doing a different way, and your body types are different. So it's always better to ask the coach that you're playing under, and then go forward with that. Again, it depends from sport to sport. So
okay, so the next question would be okay, so Tokyo 2020, which was the most anticipated event of this year, has been postponed, and Wimbledon has been cancelled for the first time since apparently World War II. For us Indians, obviously there's no certainty about IPL, which is something that every family looks forward to. So what does this cancellation of sporting events mean for future viewership? Is it going to affect?
I think it will have an impact only in those calendar years, because I think right now the propensity to consume is more. So people are really looking forward to live sport. Any kind of live sport, people are consuming.
Yeah.
There was a time in the middle where all the leagues were shut, but I think the Bulgarian league or one league was happening, and every country wanted to buy the rights for that or wanted to watch that, because they were the only ones, playing live sport. So I think sport is something which is, how should I say? Every time you go out there, the experience is different. You can go and watch your team play 38 times in a season, but the story that you see every time is different. The journey that you do is different. So I don't think it's going to be that. It's not like watching a movie, right? You can't watch the same movie over and over again. The experience might deteriorate after a point in time, and you might learn something more. But with sport, there's always something to learn, whether it's the journey to the game, whether it's the journey back from the game, whether it's the game itself, whether it's what happens in the game. It always keeps you intrigued, and it always gives you a different experience. And so I think people will look forward to it. I think they might you might even get record attendances. I think the Liverpool versus Everton game, I think, was the highest watched game ever, like from the Premier League or something along those lines. So the why was that? So obviously because the void could be felt. If you know, sport in general back in the day was to keep people engaged.
Yeah.
It's a form of entertainment. So people are so consumed by it now that they can't live without that anymore. So if it comes later also, I think there'll be more people watching it because they would have missed it so much that I think maybe the viewership will be much higher going forward than lower. That's my opinion on it. Because like I said,
That's a very,
if today you watch IPL maybe like one game or two games when the season is happening because you have your daily lives to go up with. Now, since that's also not happening, when the IPL actually starts, everybody will make sure that we watch because they felt it that they couldn't watch it. So I think that way, it will have a positive impact on the viewerships. And as I mentioned, if everyone can look at the digital side and can really engage their audiences, then it could also have a better commercial output for the same.
right. Okay. So what do you think would be the future trends in terms of innovation and technology that we've seen in the sports industry?
I think a lot of precautious things would be there, but again, it's a pandemic. You can't really prepare for a pandemic on a normal game
Right.
day. If this is here to stay and there is no vaccine, then okay, maybe there are ways that people start, looking into the games and just trying to take precautions. Maybe they do social distancing between the seats. There are certain leagues. I think the Polish league has now agreed, but before that, I think there was a gap between three or four seats between the two spectators. So I think they will take those measures. Sport has to go and grow,
Yeah.
so they will make those changes. But as and when the time comes, but like I said, you can't really prepare for a pandemic. It's not something that happens on a daily basis, So it's a one-off, and we're all hoping that it goes away. The only precautions that you will be able to take, or the only difference will be that if something like that happens, you're at least prepared to still see the seasons and the competitions through without compromising on, the stakeholders that are involved with the sport, and keep it for a longer period of time for the audience rather than going into a complete lockdown straight away. So I think they can take the levels of precautions and see how badly the situation is going, and then accordingly take.
So you're saying it'll happen in phases rather
Yeah,
than.
correct.
Yeah.
Because they know what rock bottom looks like.
Yeah.
So like now, when something happens, they can face it. They can see, okay, this is how it happened. This is how it happened. We have safety precautions for these many things. Let's put these in place and let's see. If not, if it's going in a positive direction, they'll stick to that. If not, they can go to a point which is this. Because right now there is corona. It's not gone. It is there. Infections are rising still, but sport is happening. It's without the spectators. So that's a measure, right? Like that's without spectators, no spectators. So similarly, I think they'll follow.
I think I recently came across this picture of a Korean baseball league where the spectator stands were filled with plush toys.
Yeah. I've seen it also. They're doing all kinds of things for the spectators, like, or basically for the experience to be as lively as possible, as engaging as possible. Some stadiums are putting up the pictures of the fans that buy the season tickets. So when you see that on TV, at least you see yourself there. That's one. Some stadiums have put screens where people are watching the game on Zoom or like their platforms. Their faces are there, and some people have used it for increasing the scope of branding for their sponsors, because with this, all those empty seats, it's better to at least give some mileage to the sponsor, because people are still watching all over the world. The eyeballs might be higher, so you're actually giving more mileage to your sponsor.
Yeah.
So I think everybody will try to get as innovative as possible, depending upon what their sport allows.
Okay. So these are the questions from us, and
you can see some people are asking some questions.
Yes, so Shagun will take over from here.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions that we have for you. So those are the questions that we had for you, but the audience also has some questions.
Sure.
We have someone asking, do you think that COVID has had an impact? So COVID-19, the pandemic, do you think it's had an impact on the grassroots levels of football? Like at this point, because there's always a starting point for because I know that like in the Northeast, like when you've done all this promotional and motivational activities and you have all these programs for young kids getting into football, has that created a bad backlash in that sense that, you know, parents are not really now they're just like contact sports and sports in general is not an option. So in
I
that
see.
sense.
I see. It's taken a big hit in this particular phase for sure. Because grassroots is not season. Grassroots goes on throughout the year. So this, and as we discussed, this is probably like the holiday period also in most of our country. So kids actually play more sport during this time. So that's something that they're not being able to do. That's one. So that's of course had a negative impact. There are academies and coaches that actually depend on the kids coming and playing and paying for these services. Although what we do is more of a social initiative where the kids don't have to pay anything, but it's become a way of their life. It's become a part of their life. So they look forward to a weekend, where they will go and play. That's something that they haven't been able to do. I think Brijender Anand is the one who's asked this question: impact of COVID on grassroots football.
Yeah, it was, yes.
Yeah. So I know him very well, and he also works in the grassroots space. He also works with the kids. I'm sure he also understands the impact of Corona and COVID on the grassroots football for now. But yes, from a bird's eye view, definitely it is going to take a big impact on the participation levels now. And as I mentioned, only when we know how schools are tackling this and how parents are reacting to kids being at school, because I think in school you're still more closely in connection with your peers than in a football academy or a sports program. So if you can get through that stage, I think this stage can definitely get back to normalcy. But as of now, grassroots football is suffering because the participation levels are really struggling. And the biggest loss here is that they are not getting younger, they're only getting older. So what that does is, from a competitive aspect, if they had a trajectory of going up step by step at the age of, say, 9 at a certain level, at 10, at 11 and 12, and their body grows like that, and you have to develop that much because sports people only have a certain what do you say, like a span of their career. They can only play till a certain age. So that age loss of development is something that this is going to have an impact on.
Very short-lived career. Most sports people like retire at their peak. So if the start itself is late, it's
correct. So it puts you back, and then on a competitive frame, you're just behind. So that's negative. What this might do is, India, we are playing with age cheating. So there will be kids that might be doing age cheating. They'll probably like reduce their age with 2 years or 3 years and try to come in so that they can be a little better, but be in a lower age group. So that way, what happens is, for the lower years, it's fine, but for the professional level, it becomes the careers don't last that long, and you're not at that level because you're just cheating the system. So yeah.
So the next question that we have is a more general question. I think it's more opinion based, and maybe you can give some suggestions. So we have a question about a question that says that the truth is that the fittest will survive, especially like during this pandemic. But all these fitness centers are closed. So like, what do you recommend people do to just be fit, even though like we're just limited to the four walls of a house? What do you think can be done to sort of
just me? I don't personally feel this, and I think a lot of other people who are experts would feel the same, that you don't need to go to a fitness center to be fit.
Right.
That's the first thing. You can
Right.
do enough at home to be as fit as anybody else. Of course, if you want to be like a very muscular person and you want to go and like take these competitions and stuff, yeah, then maybe the fitness centers and the gyms being closed might have a negative impact. But if you really want to be fit and you really want to survive, I think you can do enough at home and in your vicinities, in your parks, to be much fitter than some people who go to the fitness centers.
Absolutely. And there's also so much you can do with your body weight.
Yeah, like, body weight is more than enough. More than enough.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so we have this is sort of a hard question because it's hard to answer and give an exact time frame. But we have a question about what do you think is the amount of time that would be, what do you think is the amount of time that would be needed to revitalize the sports industry? So when do you think normalcy it will be achievable, which is hard to answer exactly, but like, what is your prediction or what is your understanding of it?
According to me, see, India is anyways a developing nation. For certain sports, we are still developing in that aspect as well. Even the way we consume sport, even the way we perceive sport, except for maybe cricket. That's actually it knows what it's formalized, so we know about that. For everything else, India is always developing and it's always in transition. And when I say transition, I mean positive transitions. So according to me, I mean I don't know when Corona will really go. For us to actually make the positive transitions, um, we need the participation levels and the structures to be there. If there is no participation, there are no structures. So we will not be able to evolve in a positive way. Now, I think maybe if the sports industry can get back to normal, where people are, they don't have the fear when they go out and they play and when they consume the sport, whether it's recreation, whether it's going as a fan. Let's say about 18 months, maybe 18 months, and then the revitalizing part will take another a year or so, because once it gets back to normalcy, that's when you have to take the next step to take it to the next level.
Exactly. There's always this fear of like, since we're going back to normal interaction, it might just like there's a second wave fear as well. So yeah, that makes sense.
Second wave fear also, and what happens is sometimes people, when they, okay, everybody needs to survive. It's a survival of the fittest that way. Everybody evolves. Some people might evolve into certain things by the end of the pandemic and try to do things in a different way once the sports industry comes back to normal. But there are certain things that need to be done the way they need to be done when things come back to normal. So there might be, because of that, because people have changed their ways a bit because of this situation, and for them to go back to the ways that you actually need for something to grow organically might be a challenge, and that's why it might take a little longer. That's why I'm not saying if things get back to normal in 18 months, the revitalization also starts in 18 months. It might take another year from then on for it to at least get back onto the same pace at which it was at least transiting to a positive.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. So another question that we have is, so they're saying, hey Varun, considering the fact that most people who were physically unfit had a higher risk of fatality due to the virus, do you think that this can be a blessing in disguise, where the Indian society will take up sports more seriously to get fitter post the pandemic? So I think the gist of the question is, do you think that the Indian society is going to take sports and fitness more seriously now that this has become like a crucial like factor in deciding whether a certain person survives the virus or not? So yeah.
Good question. Basically, if you saw before the pandemic, actually, the government has been taking certain steps for the Fit India movement and so on and so forth. All these government things that keep coming in. There has been a push from our side also and from other people also to make sports, a part of the school curriculum rather than just being an extracurricular, and a recreational thing. So that's something that's been in line where the push is being made, but always gets a pushback from the education side of things that no, it's going to have a negative impact. And we are a country with so much population, so everybody feels that if they're academically poor, and like I said, the sports industry is not at the level of Europe where you can really see so many opportunities in sport. So with that population, academics always takes the better of you. But with the pandemic now, at least the educated people who want their kids to be in education also more than sport can at least see the health benefits of playing a sport or being participative. Now, what that does is if more and more people do that, this will start happening from the lowest levels. And then what happens is it creates a pool of uh, talent and people at the lowest levels. And with our population, then the competition increases. And then we can obviously, put up a better challenge to the developed nations if something like this is taken up seriously by the institutions that actually can impose certain changes like this. So yeah, for sure, I think this is a good wake up call for all those people. 120%. It can be. I mean, as long as they take it as a blessing.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more, it comes like on an individual level, it comes down to personal
I'm
choice.
sure the advocation of the same people will use the fact that the death rates and the mortality rates and the fatality rates of people because of the virus were people who were not that fit. So we will always use that as a rationale to go and pitch now for this change to happen. So I think it might just get accepted without too much pushbacks now. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, right. Um, so another question we have is, with the pandemic, we have seen a necessary requirement of entertainment in terms of sports. With the EPL and other football leagues starting, do we see Indian sports leagues following suit of being forced to have their leagues played in a bubble venue? Do you think that Indian sports will follow the trend?
I think so. I think so. Indian leagues will follow the trend. I think people will wait for, uh, I think maybe the IPL, what measures they take for that, because that will be probably the
Right,
biggest
right.
competition in India, which is a team competition, and
Mhm.
that has the maximum commercial value. So I think that could be a learning curve for the other leagues to come in. And for our Indian Super League and other football leagues, it's again, I think it'll be, um, they will resume, they should resume, they will probably do it in, in stadiums or venues where they don't let spectators in. So that way, again, they need to be very adept with their digitization of things, and they should use that more. But I think go on a larger scale, it'll be a little difficult for the lower leagues to really implement similar methodologies as to what the English Premier League or IPL or an Indian Super League would do, for them to do that for their leagues, if you know what I mean. If if tomorrow a guideline is there saying you need to do all, like get all these PPE equipments for the league to happen, and you can't expect a grassroots league to have all those. You can't expect a lower state league to have all those, because they don't make enough money to have all those things and supplement the sport. So I think for the bigger leagues that have a fan base, that can digitize, that can monetize, sport will start. The point of the bubble venue is something that I think people have been talking about. Um, in Europe, it's not happening, but I think in India, when you see things like kabaddi,
Right.
kabaddi used to happen in different venues, but all teams used to play in that venue. So now what they can do is they're not going to move city to city. They could probably just have it in one city and just keep going with it. With
Right.
football, you can do that. You can also do that with football, but you can't do it in one venue because the wear and tear too much.
Right.
The pitch needs to like breathe also, and then you need enough training grounds in the vicinities. And
Mhm.
so I think that'll be a little difficult. It'll be interesting to see how they go about that. Uh, if you look at European countries, some of them are not that big, and you can really travel in a bus as well, to go and play your matches, or on a train. But when it comes to India, if you have to fly from, uh, let's say, a Guwahati to a Chennai to play a match, you can't go by a train or a bus, right? You have to take the flight. So then you have to take all those measures, and you have to take
Right.
all these certain leagues. I mean, like I said, why I gave IPL as an example. For football, also, there are a lot of foreign players that play. We don't know when foreigners will be allowed in the country. So what that does is the level of competition can go down a bit, because if they come and add value. When it comes to cricket, we are still up there with the developed nations when it comes to the sport, and only maybe 14, 15 countries play cricket actually. So India is pretty big up there. So we can actually have an IPL with only Indians, and it won't
Right.
make that difference. But when it comes to the other sports, if the foreigners are coming in and adding value to the sport, then them not coming in might be good in a way where the Indians might get more chances to play. But obviously, it brings down the level of the competition a little bit, from that perspective. So
Then
maybe
I guess it's also possible, since we don't have like international, if there's an inability for international players to participate in the IPL, then to some level it might affect viewership as well, especially global viewership,
for sure,
because yeah, because people want to see those players
for
playing.
sure. From their countries, of course,
Mhm.
120%. So that
Yeah.
those are the real challenges. That's why there were talks of maybe doing it in a venue where the country is allowing people to come in. Whether the players want to come in or not also will be another question. They'll have to
Right.
come to quarantine zones before, be in
Right.
that quarantine zone with the same group of people. The same group of people don't interact or mingle with different people. If they do, they have to take all precautions, and that bubble stays together and keeps playing matches in a bubble in different bubbles. So it's not the ideal case scenario, but if the top leagues have to do that, I think they will do that, and they can take a lot of pages out of the leagues that have already started in Europe.
Right.
On those books. for sure. Yeah.
So another question we have is sports people typically have a very short career. So loss of one season or two seasons in this situation would be pretty big for them. What advice do you have for sports people in this case, the people that are going to lose seasons, like the kind of impact that it's going to have on their career? Do you think that the sports industry would be generally understanding of this, or is it going to be a hard thing to overcome? Because country wise also the situation is pretty different. For a lot of countries, people have started to go back to being normal, but like for countries like India, that's not really the case. So losing seasons, the impact of that.
Sure. See, a loss of any season is a loss. It will definitely have somewhat of an impact.
Right.
What one can do in this situation is just try to prolong his or her career as much as possible. If you look at the tennis players, how they've done it, if you look at some football players, the way they've done it, they keep playing till 36, 37, 38. Some of them don't play after 29, 30, 31, 32. So it actually depends on that. Of course, like I said, a loss is a loss. It's definitely something that will have an impact, as we've discussed in this conversation many times, about that age that you get one year behind. From that perspective, you don't get that competition. In general, it's going to have an impact on the ecosystem as a whole. So as for the question is, what is your advice on how to handle this? Like I said, just be as fit as possible and make sure that you can keep upskilling yourself where you're not dependent on things that get affected negatively from the lockdown. So I think that's the best way to go about it.
Okay. So there's another question about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on sporting job markets, like the job market for sports in India. What is the kind of impact that COVID is going to have? Like for, I guess, for like all the kind of job titles that exist in the Indian sports industry.
So it's, I mean, overall in general, I think it will take a little bit of a toll on jobs in the market. As if you see, like from the badminton leagues to the TT leagues to the IPLs, or the football league, actually, to be honest, could be an exception because it runs for 9 months, and like at least the setup is there, so you're all together in that. And when it comes to all the other leagues, they are like short leagues. Many people keep jumping from one league to the other league when it comes to their operation jobs, or when it comes to other jobs that the sports industry actually gives about. Now because the events are not happening, they will definitely face a little bit of a challenge when it comes to that. So those people, I mean, the best that they can do is probably, again, like I said, upskill in certain different ways where when they get back into jobs, at least they have more value adds to offer their potential employer, rather than just being negative about the whole thing and say, okay, this is not happening, then maybe I should leave sport, or not be in the sports industry, maybe do something else that lasts longer or can be done without the sport actually taking place. Because like we discussed, sports is participation. Sports is a different experience every time. So for them, and it's not something that is monotonous. It's difficult to get monotonous, so that's why they also keep moving. But now, if that's taking a toll, I think it will definitely have an impact. The money that comes into sport also, apart from cricket, as I mentioned, is dependent on other businesses of people, as I mentioned before. So if, let's say, some companies are cutting down and doing laying off people, or their operations have come down and they're not being able to generate as much revenue or profits as they used to before, it's a trickle down effect. It's going to have an impact on everybody that's associated. And that way, I mean, if you see, FIFA is trying to give funds out to their member associations so that they can at least support the structures of the ecosystem going, so that when it actually comes out of that, it's not completely flat where you have to reinvent the wheel. At least you can start from back there. Otherwise, the risk is that if you don't support the member associations now, then when you come back, it'll be a bigger challenge for that member association to get back on its feet. So it might be tough times, at least for this phase now, for people who are involved with events specifically. But like I said, upskilling is not going to hurt anybody, and I think you could be in a better position to get employed post the pandemic if you have more value adds to offer. So yeah.
Right. So we're just gonna take a couple more questions, and I think one of the questions is, do you think the absence of fans, like in the studio, I'm sorry, in the stadium or in general, the absence of fans is disheartening for the sports people? And how do you see sports franchises managing sports, like motivation for these sports people? Because for a lot of sports people, the ability to see your actual fans in person in the stadium, like that's not present anymore. And as someone who's, I think, interacting with sports people so closely, especially in football, have you seen like a demotivation thing happening with them?
No, I think it's too early to say, because right now I think even the sports people understand the dangers of the pandemic, and
Right.
of course they want to give a good product out to their fans, and they know that the fans are watching. They're just not at the stadium. So I mean, of course, the way the game is played might be a little different, because you don't have the pressure of the crowd when you're an opponent playing in their home ground and you've got the ball and they're booing you, and that might take a toll on you on the pitch as such. But as far as the motivation is concerned, I think it's too early to say. And the sports people themselves, like I said, understand that it's not appropriate for the fans to actually be there. So they are also, I think, trying to do as much as possible to keep the fans motivated, rather than the fans actually motivating the
The
players here.
yeah.
So I think that goes well there, and then they understand, like they know the dangers of the same, and they just want to get the sport going on. So I think they have enough motivation. They have enough.
Right.
I think this is motivation.
Right. So I think this would be the last question for today. And the question is, now that the conversation and awareness around mental health is increasing today in society, which I'm sure um, you're aware of, like mental health is much less stigmatized than it used to be. So now that that has happened, in what ways do you think this can be penetrated through the sports and physical activity space? How do you think that a conversation about mental health, and as well as mental health either within the sports fraternity or just in general, how do you think that sports and mental health go together, and how do you think that this will be able to penetrate in the sports industry?
See, I think consumption. See, consumption of sport, anyways, is something that you do for entertainment, right? It's a release. You want to come home and you want to sit with your family and watch a game, maybe have a drink or do something. Sports coming back, like, so from an entertainment point of view, of course, the consumption of sports can definitely have a positive impact on mental health. You know,
Right.
I think you should consume as much sport as possible, at least in these times, to keep your mind away from the ills and the dangers of being stagnated. That's one. Secondly, as far as participation is concerned, the maximum a person can do at the moment is at least keep his mind and body refreshed by doing as many activities as possible at home, physical activities, fitness activities. Try to go and do as much as they can in a social distanced way, outside in the parks and places. That can have a positive impact on their mental frame of mind as well.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I mean, it's rejuvenating. I mean, doing any activity which has a physical angle to it, I think it's rejuvenating. It's a release mechanism that comes about, and I think it can definitely give out a positive. This is for the recreational part. And as far as the jobs are concerned, like I said, upskilling themselves and not being demotivated is something that they could do from that perspective. So yes, definitely. I mean, always has, like, whenever you're like, I mean, I remember back in the day when I was in like school, and there were times where the exams used to be on the head, or there used to be like a lot of that time. Those were the tensions in life. But you always like, let me go out and play and let me get like rejuvenated. Let me get out there, let me play a sport, and let me come back. And then you're more motivated also. It just
Right.
gives you that switch off and switch on. So whichever way, and it goes, not just watching live sport. It can go to even esports, for that matter. Some people look to the gaming consoles to really switch off and switch on, and that keeps them going. So if in a day you're leading to a certain area of stagnation, or you know, where it could take an adverse effect on your mental health, just put the PlayStation on, play a couple of hours, and get back to, you know, the normal frame of mind, or just get your weights out or get your exercises going, put the music on, and you know, just get it all out, and then get back into the zone. I think those breaks are very important. Sometimes we fail to take them, sometimes even like the best of us fail to take them, but I think we need to just have those switchback mechanisms where sport can really help us and, you know, keep us away from the ills of stagnation.
Right. So I know I said that that was the last question, but there's something that's very like similar to the question that I just asked. So someone, since we've already gone off this tangent,
Okay.
someone has asked, in this situation, the presence of sports psychologists is very important for the health of the players. At the same time, there aren't enough sports psychologists in the industry to help all the players. Do you think that, you know, now that the world finds itself amidst this pandemic, and it looks like it's going to be like this for the foreseeable future, and things are really going to change, there's going to be a almost like a paradigm shift in the way that things work. So do you think that the sports psychology do you think sports psychology as a field is going to garner more attention or gain greater importance? And
I
do you
personally
think that,
feel I personally feel that sports psychologists are one of the most important people in professional sport. So I think going forward, their role is only going to increase. It's just that in India, we don't really get to see much of that because sometimes the sports are struggling to even, you know, pay off their salaries to their players, let alone, you know, hiring sports psychologists. But I think the best clubs,
yeah,
sporting institutions, the best athletes all have their psychologists around because you need it. You cannot keep pushing yourself harder every day and becoming better every day and reach new benchmarks if you're mentally not in the right frame. And it's nothing to be shy of. It's nothing to be scared of. It's not like, oh, I might have a mental problem. It's like against my ego, or, you know, oh shit, somebody was going to be looking at me in a negative way if I'm going to a doctor or a psychologist or a sports psychologist. Nothing like that. I think if you need it, then that means you're normal, because you want to push yourself to the next level, and, you know, you want to take that, you want to have that extra in yourself to, you know, really challenge for top honors. And I think uh, this field definitely should be given greater importance in India. This is a make or break. You can have a great player, and if you can't get the best out of him or her, then what's the point of having the talented player? You need to know how to, you know, take the best out of the athletes, where they help you and you help them become better going forward. So I think, please, if somebody is looking to get into this, it'll be. I mean, I can't promise you a job, but definitely the need of the hour is for psychologists for better athletes going forward, for sure.
absolutely. Yeah. So I think those were all the questions that we had from the audience as well. Do you have, before I conclude, do you have any closing remarks or anything that you want to say, like, I don't know, to either sports enthusiasts or even sports people that might have joined the webinar? Is there anything you want to say to them that might motivate them, or just like, I don't know, like a positive message maybe?
I think we've discussed and covered that there, but I just feel that, you know, they should just stay motivated and they should just like keep upskilling themselves. It
Right.
could become as minimum as doing 5 push-ups when they could do only one, to, you know, getting like 5 courses done for social media or the digital side of things. You know, the spectrum is too large, but every day I think just keep doing something that you could not do yesterday, and improve yourself on a daily basis. And it's all interconnected. It's all connected to sport, and sport is connected to all this. So I think that way, any kind of motivation they need, I mean, I'm always there. So.